judicious observers of today's proceedings, the Conservative Robert Goodwill, Labour's Mary Cray and the SNP's Hannah Bardell. Robert, let's just start with Mrs May and the NHS. Do you think she's taken her eye off the ball when it comes to the NHS because of, bluntly, Brexit?
No, I think I said at the dispatch box quite recently, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And, business as usual, whether it be health or education or the other agenda policies, social mobility, we're still very much concentrating on those. But it's getting a bit predictable at PMQs. Jeremy Corbyn says there isn't enough money. Mrs May says we're putting even more money than ever before. There's more acute beds, more doctors, more nurses. But demand is increasing. And I think most people watching it are getting a little bit bored with it. And personally, I wasn't very excited by it because I've heard it all before. And then, of course, the Prime Minister comes in with, well, of course, you're in charge in Wales. Yeah. Why aren't you doing it in Wales if you think you're so good? Yeah,
there was an air of predictability about it. But, Mary Cray, let me put this to you. I mean, we all know the NHS is under massive pressure. Isn't there limited mileage at pretty much every other PMQ saying it's in crisis?
Well, I don't think my constituents are bored. Pinderfields Hospital was the one that appeared in the newspaper in Wakefield for people sleeping on the floors, and we had Philip Dunn demonstrating the government's tin ear to the plight of NHS patients, saying, seats are available if there aren't enough beds. We heard questions today about the restriction of chemotherapy for terminally ill cancer patients in Oxford. We heard the restriction on pain help for people in Hull. This is happening across the country. 50,000 people have had their operations cancelled. They deserve answers.
But let me put it to you, Labour's panacea is only a little bit more money, and it is only a little bit more than the government is already proposing. And Mr Corbyn seems to revert to slogans about money allegedly being siphoned off to the private sector.
Money is going to the private sector, and we know that Virgin Healthcare, for example, have had over £1 billion in NHS contracts. We don't think that is the right way to go. We want the NHS to be publicly owned and publicly delivered, and we think that bringing a profit motive into particularly primary care services, which have always been sort of properly funded and done well in the past. We know we don't have enough district nurses. We know we have 40,000 nurse vacancies. These are the problems that the government needs to be getting to grips with. And once again, the Prime Minister failed to give answer to those questions.
Hannah Bardell, in Scotland, there is a slightly different setup, as I understand it, that social care and the NHS are already combined. Now, that is clearly where politicians in England want to go. How difficult is it to actually do that? Because we hear all sorts of problems with separate budgets. So how simple a fix is that?
Well, nothing in these matters is ever easy, but it's about the political determination, the will and working together, and it is reaping the rewards, because in Scotland we have better results. We also have faced twice as many per head of population flu cases over the winter period, and we're dealing with it better. And when we've got the British Red Cross saying there's a humanitarian crisis in England and Wales and the NHS, I think it's important that these issues are discussed. And let's not forget the BBC did a survey last year of everybody across the UK, their satisfaction with the NHS, and Scotland came out the best.
OK, let's talk a little bit about Brexit. Robert, Mrs May kind of dodged the question about how well she was or wasn't doing on Brexit. How many marks out of 10 would you give her?
I think it's a bit more like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. When you get to 32,000, you know you can't slip back. And we've got to that first stage, and now we need to look forward. So, 10 out of 10 to where we've got already, but there's a lot more to do. And I think
10 out of 10?
For where we are,
How do you work that out?
Well, we've got past that difficult first stage, which nobody, all the pundits, particularly the Labour Party, were saying, oh, it's impossible, you won't get a deal. We got that deal on the first
stage. We've got that deal by caving in left, right and centre. We're now going to pay billions of pounds. We're going to have a standstill transitional period where basically life carries on as is.
Well, I think that's what the Chancellor has made clear, that we do need to make sure we don't have any cliff edges, and that's exactly what we've delivered. That's what business has said. That's what all sections, particularly farmers, have said. We don't want a cliff edge. We want to ensure that we have an orderly transition, but we will be leaving the European Union. We will be...
That's what the EU have warned today in the Financial Times. There was a very stark warning saying that the EU is advising businesses to prepare for a no-deal scenario. And that is going to cost jobs, it's going to cost livelihoods, it's going to cost of living. And I don't think that's what anybody who voted leave voted for.
And Mary Cray, what is going on with the Labour Party? Because your position seems to be shuffling around week to week, month to month. The latest thing I read is that you are now going to back staying in the customs union permanently. Is that
Good.
right?
I certainly hope so, because that's what I've been voting for consistently over the last year and advocating within my party. I think we need to be in a position where we stay in the customs union and where we stay in the single market. The deal before Christmas contained more fudge than my Christmas stocking, and all we've got is putting off the hard decisions to later on. What we now see this week with David Davis's letter warning, oh, how dare the European Union prepare for a no-deal Brexit. That's exactly what the hardliners in his own party have been warning about and calling for the last year. So I think we've got big issues to decide. Do we stay in the chemicals regime? What happens to our aerospace, our defence industries if we leave that chemicals regime? Something that I'm going to put an amendment down when the Brexit bill comes back on the floor of the House next week.
And how are you going to square your leader on this, or John McDonnell on this, or other prominent shadow cabinet members who seem to be of the view that you have to leave the customs union?
Well, I think they're wrong, and I think Jeremy is in listening mode on this, and those of us who've advocated staying in the customs union, I think will be proven to be right on that. It's the only place that the Labour Party can end up on, and I think eventually we'll come round to the single market. If it comes down to a choice between destroying our public services, which we so passionately want to protect, improving the number of police on our streets, saving the NHS when we get into government, then I think our leadership will make the right decision.
And Robert, a lot of Tories could end up supporting that sort of stance, couldn't they?
Well, I mean, I voted to remain in the European Union, but I get it. My constituents voted 62%, a bit like the people in Wakefield, to leave. And staying in the customs union and staying in the single market could never be described as leaving the European Union. And as I said, we've got past the first difficult stage. There's more work to be done, but I'm confident we can do that. There was a very positive article in the Frankfurter Allgemeine today from the Chancellor saying that, this is what we need to do to ensure that Britain and Germany can continue to trade and ensure that we both work together.
OK, let's talk about the other event of the week, or non-event maybe, the reshuffle. Now, Robert, you were one of the casualties, one of the men of a certain vintage, shall we say, who were bumped off. I mean, just tell me, how does it work? Does Mrs May call you in? Does she get you on the blower? Does she send an emissary? Are there smoke signals? What happens?
Well, I mean, I've been continuously on the front bench now for well over 11 years. So I wasn't too surprised. And the Chief Whip tipped me a wink that the Prime Minister might want to see me in the morning and it wouldn't be good news. So when I went in, and she was obviously uncomfortable, it's not pleasant to sack people. And I said, look...
Did you get offered a drink or anything? No. Too early for that.
No, I said, look, I know why I'm here, Prime Minister, so don't feel embarrassed. And then we had a very cordial chat and talked about one or two other things and shook hands and left on good terms.
How do you take it? Because, I mean, there was a lot about sort of the cull of the pale, male and stale or whatever ministers. I mean, how do you take that? Are you quite sanguine about it? Do you think it's a good idea or do you resent it?
Well, I mean, we've got more than 300 Tory MPs, most of whom want to be ministers, and we've got about 80 jobs on the front bench. So, I'm already well past my quota, and there's other things that I can be doing, and who knows, I may get the call again. But I think it's a bit like a football team. You can sometimes put somebody on the bench for a while,
kid.
Come back possibly.
Okay. Mary Hannah, you obviously are not men of a certain vintage. But
Women of a certain vintage.
Well, what do you make? I mean, do you support Theresa May in her desire, it seems, to promote more young women, or do you think it is in danger of teetering into tokenism?
Well, these young women seem to have been promoted to the Whip's office, which is the invisible, non-speaking enforcement roles, and I think that's probably trying to beef up the back office, if you like, because there's been some very unfortunate slips and a lost vote before Christmas. I think it's been a bit of a reshambles. She ended last year with Damien Green's resignation. She began this year with Justine Greening's resignation. I don't know what the Greens have got against her, but she's certainly not in control. Too weak to sack Toby Young from the Office for Students, too weak to sack Jeremy Hunt and move Greg Clark. So I don't think this is a cabinet that looks like Britain, and I certainly don't think it's a government that looks like Britain.
Hannah, do you think if we have more women in frontline posts that it actually changes the dynamic, the culture, the tone of politics, or actually probably not?
I think it gives different voices and different perspectives. She was on 3 counts, reasserting her power, refreshing her government and having more diversity. She's failed on all counts because Jeremy Hunt wasn't willing to go and ended up with a bigger brief. Justine Greening, and I'm really sad, I don't always agree with Justine Greening, but she was the first LGBT cabinet secretary. She's gone, cabinet minister, and it just became a complete fudge. And at the end of the day, this is a prime minister that seems to be completely dismayed all over the place. And, you know, having more women in politics, in power, you know, we've had the BBC scandal this week, we've had Carrie Gracie, you know, we need more women and different voices and people from different backgrounds in all aspects of public life. And it's really important that we do that and that every organisation, whether it's in government, public or private sector, does their very best to make sure that that happens.
OK, guys, thanks very much indeed. Sophie, as an honorary member of the Old Gits Club, I think I should probably be wary too. But anyway, that's our take on the first PMQs of the new year.
Norman, thank you.